Welcome to The Spy Who Loves Liberty. You have your host here, Gregory Junk Bond Carpenter, and in the wings is the amazing Booger. Welcome to the show, Booger. How are you today?
Doing very good, Gregory. And yourself?
I am super awesome. Our producer is hiding in the back, as usual, Mr. Jeff. I could do that, Johnson. Playing the. You ready, Jeff? Uh, Fifth Symphony in C minor. I think it's K482, but don't quote me on that, by Ludwig von Beethoven. How'd I do?
I think you did great.
Out of the park today. Thank you.
Very well, sir. We have those, and you can't use those bats that you get. Remember the bats you used to get for Bat Day? You can't use those anymore. You can't get them things. Can you imagine giving bats to the crowds today? Well, we are at a very interesting point today. I just wanted to bring up something that most people don't really think about in life. However, they are involved and they do it, and they do it extremely well. And that is deception. Now, as you know, some people know my book I co-wrote is called Reverse Deception. And it's about standard historical perspective on deception, different techniques, and how to build those things into computer networks and use them in social engineering campaigns. People for thousands of years have been deceiving others. For example, just in the last 100 years, if I say, "Hi, Booger, how are you?" Booger says,
"Hello, I'm fine."
Right? Now, do we know if Booger's really fine or if Booger is just giving me the response so he doesn't have to interact with anything that I'm doing today because he wants to have a limited interaction and move on with his day? Well, 95% of the time, plus or minus 3%, because we always study the research here. People, here it is, Jeff, get out the beeper maker. People don't give a flying leap on, see, I even deceived Jeff. People don't give a flying leap on how you are today. They're doing it out of polite company. Used to be in Western society, people would say, "Good morning," "top of the day" to you, and a number of other pleasantries that did not require you yielding personal information about yourself. Most people do not want to give up that type of information. Now, every once in a while, you'll run into what we would call an extreme extrovert, someone who just can't wait to share that information. Again, with the extreme extrovert version, let's try this again. "Hi, Booger. How are you today?"
Oh man, I'm here having coffee. Getting woke up, actually enjoying myself. Got some things going on today with the
See, too
grandkids.
much TMI, right? I want to move on with my life. Booger, he's starting to tell me about everything and anything. And did I care? Fun meters is pegged at 0.0, not caring at all. Okay.
Yes.
As long as Booger can speak when I need him to speak on the radio show today, I don't give a flying leap about what he thinks or what he's doing or what troubles he has today. As long as he can hang with me for this 1 hour.
I think I can. I think I can, man.
I think you can, Booger. Now, in reality, Booger, how's it going?
Actually fairly good, brother. Started back in the gym after shoulder surgery. So
there you go. Now you see, now that's a simple answer that a lot of people actually can accept. The limited exchange of personal information with someone else. Now, say if I was someone who Booger did not know quite as well, would he have shared that personal information with me? Odds are, knowing Booger, he might have, depending upon.
I'm an expert. Right? Yeah.
You and me both, brother. So a conversation with Booger and I tends to, if you haven't figured it out yet already, would continue on for hours and hours into the wee hours of the morning, with or without coffee, with or without tea or water or
And we
without
do.
anything.
We do
And we
sometimes.
sure, we can go on all day long, all night long. Sometimes there's one time we were discussing what the heck was it? Oh, it was about the lack of physical evidence in Auschwitz, right? And the
Yes.
reports put out by the Polish government that had questionable findings related to Nazi activity. So we started to go through the source material, and we're sitting talking with each other, looking for governmental reports and very specific stuff, not having a subjective, well, I think this is what happened. It was all straight up facts. And we were on the phone for what, 2.5 hours, I think?
Oh, it was it was a very long time just getting into the deception of history.
Oh, yeah, sure. The deception of history is one of my favorites. And that is how the extroverts would actually engage in being upfront and personal about. Now think about how two introverts go, right? The joke, for example, like I used to work at NSA, National Security Agency, and the joke there was when you're walking down the halls at NSA, an extrovert is someone who looks at somebody else's shoes. That's the extent. So introvert extrovert can also be on a subjective scale based on the person who is the intermediary and who is observing the two. Therefore, your interaction with those people will be unique every time. Someone who is an extrovert may be may appear to be an introvert to a crowd of extreme extroverts. So the scale is really an analog scale. It's not really, binary. You're either introvert or extrovert. To what extent are you extrovert? To what extent are you introvert? Is how much you will probably deceive someone else. Introverts will be much more reserve of personal information and not intentionally, but they will deceive others or lie to others more often about personal things. When it comes to a crowd that introverts are in and they're comfortable with that crowd, many introverts, about 40% of them, will open up to the point where you would believe if you saw them for the first time that you entered that crowd of 100% introverts, you would think that that person was an extrovert by how much interaction they had with the group and how much they were talking, probably as a leader in that group. That's why it's an analog scale. To what level are you, an introvert or an extrovert? If you're with a group of introverts will internally form into a scale. It will fall into a scale along the line of introvert and extrovert. And within that group, then you'll see the people that are introverts who appear to be extroverts be more open in sharing with the group. But the people who are introverts, who are really, really introverts, will still lie to each other and lie to everybody else and keep people from knowing who they truly are. People see this all the time. Now, another way that people do this, which is interesting, is in their own apparel. Now, Booger, we've seen this all the time. People come out, for example, and I'm not picking on any one race, creed, group of people, or anything like that. This just happened to be at the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York City. I saw a vast number of Puerto Rican women who had gotten themselves somehow into this spandex that they believed looked good on them.
Oh my God, yes, I've seen it.
Right. So it's, and again, not picking on any specific group, but it just happened to be all of these women. Now, there was a small group of black women trying to do the same thing, but the overwhelming majority were all of the Puerto Rican women. And the other women that were there celebrating from either Paraguay or Argentina, you could tell because they were on the side going, I have no idea what she's trying to do. They didn't engage in that behavior, right? So culturally, we learn to deceive people culturally. Now, I'm sure you've seen this before too, right? People wearing huge, oversized stuff, Booger.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not for outlawing hardly anything, but extra large spandex. I'm not in favor of that being legal. But
Hey, Greg, I don't normally interrupt, but when I lived in Colorado, we coined a phrase: spandex is a privilege, not a right.
yes.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, that's a reality too. Is would you how to say it nicely? See, now this is a not a deception, but inventing an answer or repackaging. This is an example of the deception called repackaging. Sometimes people don't look terribly good with spandex that is a size like a size 0 when they're size 14, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't look good when they're a size 14 and the spandex is a size 14. Don't think that you can just do something because you've lied to yourself and you believe yourself that it enhances your looks. And again, we're specifically talking about apparel, right? Don't turn your hair purple when it's not endearing, when you're wearing size 0 spandex and you're a size 14, and put on these fake eyelashes. And you've all seen where the piles and piles and piles of makeup come onto some people. Most people don't need that much makeup. If you're going in front of the cameras and all this other stuff, yes, you probably need a ton of makeup on top. And I'm not picking on people, again, not picking on people that wear makeup, but the ones that put about a quarter inch of makeup on, that's where the problem is. Your skin doesn't like it. It's actually bad for you, but you're living in this deception that it's good for you. Think about what happened with Michael Jackson. He went from being black to being Caucasian. He went from being a normal person to think that, to someone who was completely out of his mind. What happened to him? It was all about self deception and denial about what was happening around him and what he was doing. It happens in everyone's life. Suzanne Sherman just popped in. She's hiding in the background here. Good morning, Suzanne from Utah, the land of spandex. She said, I think spandex should be registered. You must complete an application. You probably should have what would you call it? A carry permit.
Yeah. There should be a screening process.
I think so, with a full background check.
Serial number the spandex and track it.
Do we really need national spandex registry?
Emphasis on the background.
Oh dear. Okay. Another area I wanted to cover in deception, moving away from that derriere. Moving into another area here. How about sex? Do we lie to ourselves about sex? Do we lie to ourselves about love? Oh, every day. We have more people every day who think they're a different sex, don't we? We have more people who believe that they're someone who they're not. We have more people, and my goodness, many of the great novels and stories of all times have been about love triangles. There are denied love. I mean, Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, Othello. There are tons of things. Oedipus and his mother, right? There are so many stories that people want to believe that somebody else is in love with them that they actually end up going crazy. There's stories that people are dedicated to each other, and other people believe that they can get them to love them and take them away from the people they love. And there's tons of those stories. We deny and we deceive ourselves about the truth in these situations also. I'm not one for deceiving and deception must back in everyday life. I am for being straightforward and honest with people. And when I read about something regarding politics, I have to tell myself that is just a bunch of horse hooky. For example, we recently got the results from the Mueller report, didn't we? Mueller, what do you got out there, Mueller? Nothing? Okay, all of a sudden we have a report and we got nothing. Every report of this nature that comes out is going to come out in the same manner. There's going to be a finding of no wrongdoing of the primary point or person, the subject of the investigation. There is going to be findings of obstruction of justice along the way and lying to the FBI and lying to, pick your federal agency. Now, my problem is, number one, they did this report in the first place because 2.5 years ago, we got that Grizzly Step report that spoke of the Russian activities and manipulation during our elections, which we found out did not happen either. And at the time, I wrote a huge piece on newsl.org, newsonsofliberty.org, denouncing this stupid and silly report. It is bunk. It's garbage. Well, to this day, there is no evidence of Russian collusion. Now, that leads me to two different points. Number one, there was no Russian collusion, which is probably the situation. Or number two, there was Russian collusion, and Mueller is saving his skin politically, which is probably not the case because anybody could. If you have two silver dollars, back when they were real silver, 90% silver, right? Say you've got around the 1900s, there were these silver dollars called Morgan silver dollars made by a guy named Morgan. Well, if you had two of those real silver dollars, you could actually hand those to Robert Mueller and he would probably do what you want. That's how easy it is to buy Robert Mueller in DC. He will give you the answer to whatever you want.
Okay.
Because he is that weak of character. He was a crappy director at the FBI. I got into it on Twitter with Louis Freeh, the other former director of the FBI, who was another piece of crap director at the FBI. These guys skimmed funds from the FBI. They bought themselves massive multi-million-dollar homes. They got second homes, third homes. They did well on our tax dollars. You can buy this guy to say anything you want. When you come in and you don't have any evidence to start with, you can't make something up. Otherwise, you're going to be in a tough situation yourself by introducing falsified information. So therefore, you couldn't create something that wasn't there. Mueller didn't have anything to go with. The Obama administration shut down Miss Hillary's investigation. Emails showed that. And we have no truth coming out of politics anymore. Now, the second problem that I have with the Mueller investigation is it was spun up specifically to target other people in Trump's administration and people that are associated with him. These are the ones who work with him, protect him, and actually give him good information and advice. These are the only ones who were indicted in any way. And they were indicted for what? For lying to the FBI. And again, You know, the FBI lies to us, no big deal. The CIA lies to us, no big deal. When you lie to them, you're going to prison. Remember, think about that program, that MK Ultra program. I keep going back to that one because that's the one that people most remember. They were doing mind control. They were surgically cutting people's brains open and putting crap in there to control their mind. This was not something that people chose to do. This is why we have the IRB process now. The institutional review boards to say, oh, you can do this to humans. You can't do this to humans. This is why those things exist, because it came out that they were doing these things to people. They dumped millions of mosquitoes on towns in Florida to see what the diseases would do to the populations. They introduced LSD into one whole town, in the water, in the food, everything. In France, they took prisoners in Central America and infected them with diseases that had no cure just so they could study them. And if it wasn't for the fact that the Tuskegee Airmen Project started before the CIA was born, I would say they probably had a hand in that too. But it was our Department of Health that started that. So I would not limit government lies and deceptions on the population to the CIA. It is very apparent that the Department of Health, the Department of Commerce, every single agency in some way probably has a serious level or serious effort that lies to people every single day. So if we're getting lied to all the time, what do we believe? What should we believe? Booger, when you're taking you get up in the morning and you want to take a deep breath and enjoy the day, and you want to catch up on some of the new news or look up something historically, do you go to CNN? Do you go to PMSNBC? Do you go to Fox News, or what do you do?
Oh, absolutely not. There are a couple news sites that I have found that back their stuff up very well, and they're the ones I go to on the internet.
And as long as the internet's free.
You know what's hilarious? What's hilarious on this is I have friends, as you do too, that are Fox News junkies or MSNBC junkies.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to bring information into the discussion that you can backstop with through multiple sources on the internet, and people say, oh, that's that internet crap. And you'll be like, no, it's not crap, whenever it can be traced to an original source document, and that document can be verified. It is no longer crap then. Yeah, but they just want to stick to the news and the deception.
And that's a really good point, because people are much more comfortable living a life of deception as opposed to living a life of truth. Most people, like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, guess what? Most people can't handle the truth. They're not looking for that type of disruption in their everyday life.
You are correct. It would destroy everything they have based their life on.
Right. And that actually touches into people's belief system.
Yes.
And that's kind of what we're going to be what we're focusing on right now, is the manipulation of your belief system. That is hard to do. You usually people's belief systems are tucked away deep down inside and are not manipulated or changed once you get to about 25 years old or so. For boys, it takes a little bit longer, but for girls, it's pretty much solid from the time that they've hit their late teens, mid to late teens. Your belief system encompasses the morals and values that you live your life by. Boys, again, are a little bit more whacked out in the head until they're older. Has something to do with the fact that boys don't fully grow up physically or psychologically until they're a little bit older than girls, which is why boys are more problematic than girls growing up in many cases. But if you can get to somebody's belief system, for example, I believe in God, right? That is a statement of belief. You have nothing to base it on other than the fact that you have some books to read from and that you have the information that was passed on from your parents and from others in your community that says there is a God. If you were to take tangibles and try to use other tangibles to prove that point, for example, witnessing a miracle. I haven't seen any miracles. Booger, have you seen any miracles?
I won't say I've seen any miracles.
Okay. So it is fully a belief. That's all there is. And the belief system is the hardest thing to change. Once people believe that there is something or you can do something, their mind is set on it. I believed for a long time I could jump out of a plane. I did. And I was able to validate my belief system. I'm sure Booger had the same type of thought the second time, right? The first time you jump out of a plane is not so bad, right? You're just kind of like going, you're tired, you don't care, right? It's the second time you have the concept of what's coming. So you're basically like, oh, I remember what happened last time. It was okay, but it wasn't that much fun.
Yeah. Down. Sorry about that. You get flipped upside down and horrible opening shock. Yeah.
It's something. So yeah, that's a good thing there, folks. If you haven't jumped out of a plane, go do it, please. Jump out of whatever you want. Just make sure it's pretty high up.
Public service announcement: make sure you're wearing a chute,
a functional parachute that's been, let's just say, it's been put together by someone who would jump with it.
Jeff, you're full of gems today, aren't you?
But you know what? If your parachute doesn't open, relax. You've got plenty of time. You have the rest of your life to fix that problem, however long or short it may be.
That's right. There it is. Who needs any type of backup? I mean, come on. You can spend the rest of your life working on that problem, and you can live comfortably knowing that you'll have just about that long, or maybe almost that long, a few seconds afterwards or so. Otherwise, you become a lawn dart or you become the bouncy ball guy. One or the other. There's no in between. Oh, gosh. So anyway, back to belief systems. Hello, Suzanne. This is the second time I've heard you this morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. What a party we're having over here at the radio station today, huh?
This is good times and low taxes.
You're a couple hundred years late for that one.
Yeah, I've just finished calculating my federal. I don't want to call it a tax burden.
Tribute.
My tribute. Yeah, my tribute to Trump. My federal tribute to Trump and the oligarchs. It exceeded $70,000 this year. That's what I said.
Yeah, I remember the year I got hit for $30,000. That hurt. So I can just imagine what you got hit with.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, like, well, do I know anybody who's actually going to get this money from me? Besides, congressmen, senators, lobbyists who'll just stuff some of the money in their pocket. But, that's a hefty chunk of change. I could have hired 2 people in my business for that amount. And this is not including what I had to pay to Herr Governor Northam here, the Nazi surgeon who wants to kill the babies because it's the right thing to do. Don't ask. Virginia's going south, and not in a good way. So, who are these people that I'm giving my money to? I have no idea. I've never seen a person who I could say that I've given this charity to. And part of the Ponzi scheme for paying, quote, taxes is that the government becomes that middleman, or, well, shoot, what's that agnostic pronoun we're supposed to use? Anybody remember that one? Say or something?
No.
What is it?
I don't remember, but I'm not going to deny myself the truth there. I haven't seen anyone who has received my money. And I defy anybody else out there who can say that, oh yeah, I know that my tax money goes to Billy Ray Cyrus or Billy Bob Thornton or whoever, that you could actually put a name to it and a face and go directly give them the money. If I give someone directly, like my house cleaner, she comes in and she does her stuff and she runs a church charity. And I periodically give her stuff because they have a charity there and they're raising money. I can't turn that in and have the federal government bless off and say, "Oh, that's a valid charity." It's, no, because it's just a little garage thing that they have run out of the basement for the church. It doesn't have a federal tax ID number. The papers are not signed. They're not sealed. You don't understand. It is not run through us. Ergo, Gregory can get a tax, quote, break and be able to keep some of his money. No, I'm not going to get the benefit of giving to Goodwill, who misuses 90% of their funds. I'm not going to get the privilege of giving to UNICEF, who misused 95% of their funds. No, I can't give to my local charity. I can't give to the local homeless guy because there's no benefit again. There's no benefit for him. There's no benefit for me. There's only benefit for government. And that's the root, that's the basis of all of our deception in the states today. Government has been the backbone of deception for a very, very long time. There was a discussion on the Cerberus Radio thread on Facebook the other day. I don't know if anybody out there had seen it, but it was a very interesting thread. We're talking about immigration and the problems with immigration. And there was discussion back and forth about where the problem started, how it became really bad. And nothing against the guys who were writing the information back and forth, but nobody started at the beginning. They all started somewhere recently with the legislation in 1965, with what Ronald Reagan was doing, this and that. Nobody started in the 1870s when the states told the feds, we're having a problem. We want you to do it. And they took it offline and they handed over their authority to the feds. Why? The xenophobic movement in America started in the 1870s. And it was at its height in the 1890s, which is why we ended up with a pledge, a loyalty pledge. Nobody trusted the immigrants, the stupid immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. The Chinese Exclusionary Act. No Chinese people can enter the United States, 1882. 1917, the beginning of World War I. We took people of German descent, and what do? We put them in concentration camps here. People killed dachshunds and other German dogs in the streets. People of German descent were hung. All of the breweries nearly went out of business. We became what we feared. By 1924, with the Immigration Act of 1924, we started with the Border Patrol. That's when the Border Patrol began. Why? Because we created a problem for ourselves. We had excluded Chinese, Asians, and other groups. And what were they doing? The Chinese were coming to Mexico and then coming across the border. The Chinese were going to Canada and then coming across the border. That was the first major influx of illegals coming into the States. It wasn't the Mexicans. In Arizona last year, the second biggest group of illegals was not very far behind the first group. But nobody talked about it. Who was it? It was the Irish. There were almost as many illegal Irish immigrants getting into Arizona last year, or excuse me, 2017, than as there were people of Mexican descent trying to get into Arizona. Where's the outrage? Deception. The Chinese entering from Mexico. Did we complain about it? For a short time, but we had the Border Patrol by then. It was in 1942 that FDR asked all the Mexicans to come and work in California. Why? Well, because World War II happened to be something. Another group of deceptions got us into that. But World War II was something that happened to be going on at that time. And, well, by God, we needed people to work the fields. These were jobs that Americans wouldn't do because they were, well, fighting a war that they probably shouldn't have gotten involved with. Time after time during history, horrible regimes raise their head. Why is it our job to go and stop that regime if it does not threaten us, either directly or indirectly? When does it become our job to do that? We chose not to intercede in France back in 1787, 1789, 1791. We didn't intercede in France again in the revolutions in the 1830s. Why on earth? Deception. And when you get to deception, you have to understand who the ultimate victor is. And with that, I'll give a little bit, and then I'll let Booger talk about the ultimate victor, who happened to be the international banking cartel, who Booger will transition into the next part of the show here when we talk about this piece. So go ahead, Booger. Give us a little bit on the international banking cartel.
Well, the one that's going now was set up by the Rothschilds. Okay. Right. And slowly but surely, it was actually, people would be very just interested. It would interest a lot of people if they would get into the whole background of how the Rothschilds managed to create their banking cartel.
Let me do something first, Booger. Let me do something real quick here before you get into the whole Rothschilds here. Let me explain to people that the richest, quote, person in the world is Jeff Bezos, right? He has no product. He has no services. He's just a middleman. So he's actually involved in usury, which is, not talked about favorably by any major religion in the world. Number two, I believe, was Bill Gates, and number three was Warren Buffett. And nowhere in the top $100 billion group or tens of billions of dollar groups is anyone with the name Rothschild. All of the Rothschilds have taken, again, another deception here, which is this is just brilliant. And they've divided up their fortune so that different members of the family have certain amounts allocated to them and work different aspects of the banking, transportation industry, and things like that, so that their own individual personal wealth is not enough to raise any eyebrows. But it's been estimated that the Rothschild family's total worth exceeds 3 trillion, which is roughly half of the wealth that exists on Earth. So it's a deception that actually hides the family's wealth on top of everything else. You're not going to pull up Rothschild. If you pull up richest person in the world in a Google search or a DuckDuckGo search or something like that, you're not going to see anybody with the name Rothschild in the top 100, 200, maybe even 300 or so. So just be aware that there's another deception layered on top of the deception itself, which is actually brilliant on their part. Go ahead, Booger. Sorry.
Oh yeah, it's
Hey,
Well, looks like Booger has another train coming again.
No, I'm good. I'm good. My cursor accidentally hit the mic. No, what it is on it, they have a system set up where they can fabricate digital currency out of thin air and then lend it in usury and keep everyone a slave to them. Basic
Much
system.
like the Federal Reserve does.
Federal Reserve actually. It goes back and it's went back and forth in history on whether or not a Rothschild or a Rothschild family member has been sitting in a command position in the Federal Reserve. Okay. So they get out of there just enough to say, oh, we don't really own it. But then they'll flip back in, you know what I'm saying, to that control mode. Whichever puppet they put in during the time period for them to be able to say, no, we don't really own the Federal Reserve. The guy that they put in there is a puppet.
Sure, which is exactly how it started back in the day. It was J.P. Morgan, Carnegie, and the Rothschilds were one level removed from having direct control within the Federal Reserve. If you look at the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, it actually gets into a bunch of that stuff there too.
Yes, which is into the deception. Again, like we've talked about, it's the deception. And what they've got is they can lend money. Okay, let's say what's going on in Venezuela right now. They will create, okay, we want to lend Venezuela $5 billion to get these oil certificates from them at 31 cents on the dollar. They get in the computer, they type in X billion of dollars, and they have mined no gold. They have created no wealth whatsoever. And they just transfer control of those digits over to Venezuela. And the big deception is those digits are worth something. They're absolutely worthless. But people voluntarily trade, hard goods for those computer digits. And the whole thing is set up. They create no wealth, but they get a legal contract set up with these people where they agree to transfer hard assets to the Rothschild bank or the central banking dynasties. They'll transfer these hard assets because they've entered this monopoly game per se, where they want to play, and they get these digits and people will exchange the real wealth with them. But that's the big deception. All of that digital currency is really worthless.
That's the bottom line, folks. So all of this personal deception that you're doing with yourself every day of your life is never going to solve any problem that you face. All you're going to do is force these problems to continue in the world. There is no value to the fiat currencies that exist out there. The real value is in the hard assets, as Booger said. Real estate, precious metals, gold, silver, things of this nature, livestock. These are things of actual intrinsic value to the human race. digital currency, fiat currency, has no value whatsoever. If you ever taken the time to look at the quote dollar bill that you hold in your wallet, tell me where it says it actually has any value. It doesn't. It doesn't even tell you it has value. They've given up. It's gone. The only value you have, and it's not, and then there's no value even in the coinage that you hold. Your coinage has been devalued periodically. It's gone. 1964 was a big changeover. Coins used to be 90% silver. Then they became 40% silver. It's called clad coinage. And then by 1968, the amount of silver dropped again to trace amounts. There is no value to your coins. By 1982, the composition of a penny had to be changed from 98% copper and 2% zinc to 2% copper and 98% zinc. Why? Because it cost more than a penny to make the penny. Your coinage has no value. The only value that's out there is what's in items of intrinsic value. Period. Period. Stop lying to yourself. Stop playing the game. You do yourself and your kids no favors by playing the game. Eisenhower warned us in his farewell speech that we have to be cautious of what? Oh, yeah, the military industrial complex. Everybody knows that, Greg. No. He told us, be careful and resist the temptation of mortgaging our children's future with the pleasures of today. Well, did he really say that? Yes, he did. And as a matter of fact, we're going to play the whole speech on here one day. I think we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that next week, Jeff. Eisenhower's full farewell address. And we're going to stop as we go, and we're going to talk about some of the things that he brings out that are at the heart of government deceptions, of things that are happening now that they warned about years ago. You know, when JFK died, who was it that called for the abolishment of the CIA? Oh, it was Harry Truman. Why? Because he knew, he understood what was going on. He realized the deception that was in place. Think about that. Our former president, on the eve of the assassination of another president, calls for the abolition of a U.S. organization because of its involvement in the problems with the death of that president. There were implications at the time, and there's still very, very obvious implications. When you look at the database of 286 people who died within a couple years, I think it was 3 years after Kennedy's assassination, many of them before they could be questioned by the Warren Commission. When you look at that list of people that passed away, most of them died under suspicious circumstances. What do you mean by that? Well, guy fell off a building. Cause of death? Accident. Guy was shot twice in the head. How does that work? What do you mean accident? He was shot in the head twice. Another guy killed by CIA assassin. What? How does that work? It works, folks, because we're not paying attention. We're not paying attention. 4 people killed on a flight to Mexico. Why were they going to Mexico? I know. Do you? No, you don't. We don't look into these things. We gave up a long time ago looking for the truth because it challenges our belief system. We are safe not knowing everything that's out there. And that's where most people like it. Booger, we were talking about this before. People don't like to hear the truth, do they?
No, the truth, especially with the dynamics of what's going on in the world today, the truth is very uncomfortable and it is scary.
That's right. And when you get that picture of 1950s America in your head, you want to run back there with all the stupid stuff that's happening today. You want to hide because that's a comfortable picture. Oh, by the way, that picture was painted for you by the CIA as part of a program to make America look better than the communist nations. They paid to have all that propaganda. Look at the commercials of the time. Look at look at the advertisements in the newspaper. Tell me that's not propaganda.
Yes, the whole fabrication of the American dream concept. It did not exist till they started pushing that concept in Hollywood. A lot of people do not know that.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Who had the American dream before the 50s? Nobody. There was no American dream. American dream
Nope.
was to work hard and do well for yourself and do well for your family. That was the American dream. Now it's got to have a house. Why? Because the mortgages were taken away from the middle class, the upper middle class people, and turned over to banks, which supports the international banking cartel. You're paying your interest, your usury, to the international banking cartel for the privilege of renting a house, because if you don't pay your taxes, they're going to come and take your house from you, right? They'll throw you out if you don't pay your taxes. So again, you're getting jacked up on both sides. Booger, while we have a couple minutes left, let's talk a little bit about the banking issues and some of the crazy things that are happening in Venezuela again. I want to cover this. This is amazing stuff.
Okay. As you know, I stay in contact with Venezuela constantly. What's going on down there right now? And this is pretty remarkable. I mean, I can get the actual time on it, but I don't have the actual date that the transfer took place. But 8 tons of gold was transferred out of the Venezuelan central banks and sent to central banks in Europe.
8 tons.
8 tons.
Jeff,
Now,
do the math on that, Jeff. It's $1,274 an ounce. Go.
Yes. Hey, you know, and remember we covered in the one program the whole purpose of the Chavez Maduro regimes were to borrow massive amounts of money at extremely high interest rates and back these loans up with hard assets.
Mm-hmm.
These central banks do not really make any wealth when you pay your loan back with more useless digits in the computer. They make actual wealth when you default on your loans because you failed in the monopoly game to provide them with the useless digits back. Okay, that is the entire game.
That's the scheme.
And that's the scheme. And remember, we talked about this is all central bank oriented, but remember, you've got the Russian central banks, the Chinese central banks, which all fall in under the Rothschild umbrella. But what's going on down there right now? The actual number, it's pretty staggering, of Russian troops that have been landed in Venezuela. So I'm not going to throw it out without backing it up.
Right.
I've got photos on the way of them offloading and moving to bases. Surface to air missile batteries have also been sent in there. and an aircraft took off from Venezuela and was over Colombian airspace with diplomatic clearance, but it had emergency difficulties, some sort of, I don't know, mechanical, electrical, and it had to set down in Colombia. I'm going to get the base it set down on all the details. And the Colombians and Venezuelans do not get along. Okay. And Colombia is watching what's going on over there like a hawk. When it set down, their customs with military boarded this Russian aircraft. They knew where it came from, its point of origin, where it was going to. And guess what they found on board? 4 tons of gold.
Oh, deceptions.
Yep.
Nice. And there you go, folks. See, it's really happening there. So we gotta put together a little bit of on the ground stuff. So we'll get some more evidence back to you here soon. But again, straight out of the source, right out of there, folks. This is what's going on. There you go. Thank you, Jeff. It took him a minute or so. So the the tonnage question I had before turns into okay, my question is, Jeff, did you put the commas in the wrong place? It looks like you did. Because my calculations...
0.
What's that?
Take off the last 0.
The last 0. You got lots of zeros here. Okay. So it's $331,558,400 at today's gold rate. So that's not a... that's not a minor amount of money. It is... to keep it in perspective, though, it is less than any federal highway bill that has been signed.
That's interesting.
So keep that in mind. The last federal highway bill, I remember the one signed by Bush, was $200 billion. $200 billion, folks. So this is $331 million that has been taken away from the from the international banking cartel, which, with usury at 3 to 7% interest over a period of 25 years or so, would have returned billions of dollars. Billions. And there you go, folks. It's deception upon deception upon deception. You're not getting the true information that's coming out of Venezuela. You're not getting the true story about it. You're only getting parts of what has been filtered. Good example. The president's news guys, right? They have these little bits and clips that they push out to the news stations. Well, the news stations just run it. This has been happening for years. Years. They push propaganda all the time on you. Be aware. Wake up, folks. Please. Don't sit there with the sheet over your head and pretend everything's okay. It's time for you to not be afraid. It's time for you to stand up for what you believe. It's time for you to take control of your life and your kids' life. Get your kids' life and your grandkids' life back again.
Yeah. One thing to note on like Venezuela, they have the mineral wealth. They do not have to get loans.
Right.
Why not pay for all of the services and goods they need with straight gold or straight oil? They don't do it because they are their leaders are puppets of the banking cartels. Okay.
Well,
they get the
that's
loan.
that's why Chavez was in jail for just a couple of years and then right back with full privileges and rights. You all for listening so much. We love you all. God bless you. Please keep listening and spread the word. Cerberus Radio Network. Take care.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. My name is Suzanne Sherman. I will be your host here for the next hour on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. It's a wild morning here at the Cerberus Radio Network. Tough act to follow if you're listening live. Just had a live episode. We are in our second hour of live programming, The Spy Who Loves Liberty, with Junk Bond and Booger. Fascinating conversation about deception and all the lies that we live with and are presented with today. So if you missed it, catch us on SoundCloud. You can replay it on YouTube if you are listening live. Join our YouTube chat, participate in the shows. Your questions, comments, and concerns will be addressed while we are live. Otherwise, you can reach me on an email on my new webpage, SuzanneCSherman.com, and you can send me a message there as well. Like I said, we have SoundCloud. We have a Radio Co link as well. And we've added a new show to our Radio Co network menu here. And the hostess of that show will be joining us. She is a rock star in the preparedness community. She was a huge inspiration when I started getting involved. She is also known as Prepper Chicks, and the author Annie Berdel. I will be bringing her on in a few moments here. I have a couple quick announcements I want to make. I usually don't share all these things, but one of my Facebook friends, he is a bushcrafter and a man who really loves God and his family. He was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. His children are young. He has a GoFundMe page, and you can also reach him directly, Justin Sage Williams. You can find him on Facebook. He is offering for sale many of his primitive survival arrowheads and other crafts that he does. He's very talented, and for a donation, he will send you one of these items. They're looking to raise money for his treatment. As you can imagine, it is extremely expensive. There is a GoFundMe page if you're inclined. Justin Sage Williams Brain Tumor Fund. So if it is in your heart to help this family out, please go there and help them out. He's a wonderful human being, despite all the pain he's going through. Every single day, he praises God and shares his faith and love for the Lord. So don't want to start on a sad note. He's a very positive guy, and he's going to fight. So I've been cheering him on, and we wish him the best. Couple things we're going to get into before we start preparedness today. Last week, we talked about EMPs and Trump's executive order that this government prepare and harden our grid system. We touched on the nature of executive orders, which are constitutional, which are not, and then got in a little bit to prepping. But because we had such a busy show, we didn't get into it too much. So we're going to put about half of our show into that today. And Annie will be joining me in some of the other conversations we have as well, because unlike a lot of people that discuss preparedness, she goes to the dark side and also talks about politics. Ooh, a lot of them don't want to do that. You know why? Because, Jeff, what I've noticed, a lot of people that have these prepper shows, they're almost like infomercials, and they don't want to offend advertisers or people that might be listening by getting into politics. So I have a philosophy that unless you understand the proper role of government, if there's a collapse and we need to rebuild, if you don't understand what we need to do differently, your preparedness isn't going to do you any good, and vice versa. That being said, Jeff, how are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty well. It's been very busy this morning, 2 hours of live radio, and so I've been enjoying every minute of it. We've had great people on. Who doesn't love Booger? And of course, our most favorite Junk Bond. But I'm looking forward to hearing you and your guest.
Well, and I want to thank you also for doing a little work after school yesterday and helping me record an episode of Fundamentals of Federalism. As people might not be aware, Fundamentals of Federalism is really where I do an audio version of published articles. It was requested that I make some of these so people could listen to them because they couldn't read them well on their phone. And this is your network, folks. We're here to do what you want us to do. If you want us to make these So you can listen to these episodes. We're fine with that. This, I did the oral presentation of National Reciprocity is a Trojan Horse. My good friend Carl Jones co-wrote that. It was originally published by the 10th Amendment Center. And you can find that over on our Cerberus Radio Network on the SoundCloud page, and it will be up there. So thank you, Jeff. I know it takes a lot. I botch it when I'm trying to be flawless in my presentation, and I tell you, you're not going to have to edit, but you always do, and your efforts are very much appreciated. On my Suzanne C. Sherman blog, I have a new blog on my webpage, and this one is Lies My National Park Told Me. And this was a great follow-up to the show that we just had this morning. And this was actually, I touched up an article that was published by the American Conservative in 2016. And it details the lies and deception that I experienced at national park scenes and Colonial Williamsburg, Monticello and Montpelier, all propaganda, very, very little history. The only history they really want to cover is slavery. If you want to see the comments, which are absolutely mind-boggling on the American Conservative piece, I think it was called "Will the Founders Be Remembered as Slaveholders?" I was excoriated for having the audacity to mention things and that I did, and that slavery wasn't important. That wasn't what I said at all. But you can read the comments there, and you can again see this on my blog, Lies My National Parks Told Me. We put it up on our web pages and our Facebook pages. Speaking of our Facebook page, you can follow us there on Facebook, facebook.com, Cerberus Radio Network. CRN is our fan page. Suzanne Sherman's The Wasatch Report is my news page. And Jeff has kindly volunteered, well, not really volunteered. I kind of told him to do it. No, just kidding. To be an admin in the event I get thrown back in to the Facebook penitentiary. He will help keep that page up and running so you can be kept on top of what we're doing here. Annie Berdel, rock star of preparedness, Prepper Chicks, wildly popular Facebook page. How are you, my dear?
I guess I have to go off of mute, don't I? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now? What a morning. Hey, that was pretty cool. Thanks for all your kind words, but I'm just sitting here laughing myself about all of them.
We're having a great
but that's cool.
You know, when
yes, we are. You know,
and I started getting interested in this. I was new to Facebook, and I tell people I found this page, and the information there was so helpful. And you actually had, and we're going to talk about this a little bit today about pressure canning and all this. You had a video up there that it was the same model. And I have the All-American 21 quart pressure canner. And this gal, you posted her video. It showed me step by step how to do that. This thing was so intimidating when I got it. And I wrote to you and I thought, wow, this gal's actually writing back. And we became friends there. And here we are now. So introduce yourself, tell people about you. Then we're going to get into a little bit of news and federalism. Then we're going to dive right into prepping.
Well, my name is Annie Berdel. I run the Prepper Chick site on Facebook and everywhere else that you find us. But I started Prepper Chicks back in 2011. And it's just a catch-all. I mean, really, we're just, you know, I'm nobody. I'm just out there sharing information. I think it's important. You brought up earlier the fact that I do talk about politics. I do talk about the reasons why we should be prepping, because I think that's important. And to stay abreast of all of the information that's going on out there, because right now I'm seeing a lot of people like deer in headlights because it's coming from all directions, and it's not the doomsday prepper hype that was out there for a few years. It's more real life, you know, and we've got an election coming up next year that is going to, in my opinion, probably turn this country on end. So I think it's important that we stay ahead. It's one of the most important parts of preparedness, is watching and trying to get as prepared as you can for different scenarios. And unfortunately, politics affects all of us. But I do not, you'd mentioned earlier, I don't take advertising because I don't want somebody's thumb down on me. I've been known to cuss once in a while. So if I do today, I'm trying to keep it clean this morning. There's a reason why my show's on at 10 o'clock at night, but I apologize ahead of time. But sometimes, you know, you just get so passionate about something and it just kind of slips. So
Or
I do apologize if that happens.
if you're like me and you're trying to do your yard work and then your lawnmower won't start, your backup lawnmower won't start, your weed whacker won't start, I tell people it sounds like there's a fight going on between Teamsters, longshoremen, and iron workers in my front yard. So yes, we all suffer from mouse syndrome. So I know we can beat this today. And but we are so delighted to have your show, Prepper Chicks After Dark, on our network. As we've been wanting to get more preparedness in there, and we've got a really interesting article you and I are going to pick apart a little bit later in the show. TheOrganicPrepper.com, how to start prepping, and as you mentioned earlier, common sense. And you also mentioned
Absolutely.
I watched that show when it first came on, and I thought, I'm never going to start preparing because these guys are running around in hazmat suits. They're taking off in school buses with their goats and their chickens. They're living in shipping containers. I can't do this. Folks, you can do this and not lose your minds and make your children look like fools in the neighborhood. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
And I say that as I'm friends with several of the people that are on that show or were on the show.
As am I.
A lot of them have said would never do it again.
Yep.
I just had Survivor Jane on my show last week. You know, she was on the last couple seasons of the show, but it's TV. It's there to sensationalize and make a buck and, you know, get people to watch and ratings and all that. It's just not, you know, there's some little, you can glean some information from it that might be beneficial, but it's there to get ratings. So yeah, we're more real life. We're more, you know, you lost your job, you got medical issues, you know, those kind of things. So yeah. So life is not as glamorous sometimes as we would wish it to be.
And you have another Facebook page, Prepper Chicks Blue, which focuses on the political side of things. So we want to make sure people are aware of that. And one of the reasons we need to be prepared is we have this system of government that refuses to recognize its constraints. We have an education system that backs it up and indoctrinates future representatives into that mindset. We've got a media system that backs them up as well. And we are seeing that we're going to see it more as we get into another election cycle. We saw it last time, the lies with CNN in the pack there, backing Hillary Clinton up, CNN, Donna Brazil, fixing the debate questions for Hillary Clinton ahead of time. Donna Brazil was rewarded for her efforts with a nice, cushy little job at Fox. So good for her. So folks, turn those stations off and listen to us instead. We also are experiencing, as I'm sure you're aware of, massive censorship by really what we consider the town square of the 21st century. And that is social media, technology. People like us are not getting a voice. I don't know if any of you saw that absolutely awful interview or I guess testimony of Mark Zuckerberg before Congress, but they let him slide. He was not answering questions. He kept saying, I don't know. I don't have that information. I'd have to get the person. Congress just moved on. If I was one of the guys interviewing him, I would say, all right, here's a date, here's a time. You come back with the guy that has these specific answers, and then we're going to address them. Once again, it was a dog and pony show. People are saying Facebook is a private entity. Twitter is a private entity. Google is a private entity. Accordingly, they can do whatever they want. And that's what I was arguing at first as well. But as we see, these people are in cahoots with the government, and they are really, if you look at Google's connection, watch the show, The Creepy Line, you will see government uses all of their documents. The national government, pardon my French, and Google are joined at the hip. When Obama said we were going to have transparency and then have a log of everybody that went into the White House, we had Mark Zuckerberg there more than General Petraeus. It was crazy how much he was there. There's an article out of Mises.org by our friend Ryan McBacon, who's been on the show here. 3 reasons why Mark Zuckerberg wants more government regulation. And this quote is going to blow your minds. Here's what he actually says. I believe we need a more active role for governments and regulators. By updating the rules for the internet, we can preserve what's best about it. Check this out. The freedom for people to express themselves and for entrepreneurs to build new things while also protecting society from broader harms. He actually said the freedom of the people to express themselves. Jeff, how many times have I gotten thrown in Facebook jail for violating
at least three
community
times, maybe
commu-
four.
This is insane. And what I the stuff that I had put out there, the last two was nothing compared to the stuff that you see out there today. It's not the kind of information that they care about with bad words or something. It is the target of their information. If you're speaking the truth, they don't want it. If you're not spewing the Marxist rhetoric, they don't want it. What sort of regulation will this be? He concludes, we need new regulation in 4 areas: harmful content, election integrity, privacy, and data portability. Now, when I was in law school, we were taught that fundamental principles of due process require that any kind of laws or regulations must be clearly defined so the people know what rules they're breaking. Now, again, we're not talking about criminal laws here, but we're talking about our fundamental ability to communicate ideas supporting the lifestyles that we advocate, that we want to live and preserve. We are not allowed to do this. So here's what he said. And we don't know what is harmful. Is harmful content going to be banned because, I don't know, maybe it is supportive of preserving the life of the unborn? If you want to know what happened there, let's jump over to an article about Twitter. Twitter suspends the account of pro-life movie Unplanned, deleted 99% of their followers. So they're deleting pages for movies that depict and explain a policy that they disagree with. A pro-life movie is going to be banned. Apparently, they reinstated it. I went back there and they have a page that's got over 300,000 followers. If that's 1% of their followers, they say they deleted 99% of the followers. So I don't know if they reinstated them or not. But the bottom line is, something that is intended to preserve the life of the unborn is being banned. They will not even entertain these discussions. They talk about having free and open platforms and an ability for people to express themselves, but they don't practice this. So let's look into why Mark Zuckerberg wants to have more regulations. Anyone hearing these words about protecting the people and their ability to receive information, he's looking to adopt versions of the European European Union's, beg your pardon, General Data Protection Regulation. Anyone hearing these words should immediately assume this article is saying this newfound support for regulation is calculated to help Facebook financially. This is the case in all areas of law. We've got these people with the technology for Bluetooth and other insurance companies, and the cars making wireless hands-free devices, all behind the legislators banning texting and driving. Why? So they can make more money. This is a man who, as I mentioned earlier, lied repeatedly to his customers and Congress about who can access users' personal data and how it's going to be used. He once referred to Facebook users as dumb Fs. Fill in the blanks. He lied to customers, not to be confused with the users, about his video platform, the idea that he now voluntarily wants to sacrifice some of his own power and money for humanitarian purpose is highly doubtful. Again, he has made his fortune. So we have 3 reasons, before we move on, why he wants to help the regulation of that, or why regulation will help Facebook. First of all, regulations will give Facebook more monopoly power. This is true regardless of what area you're talking about. It seems like these companies always benefit from regulation. Why? Because it quashes those that are trying to rise up to compete. Find a competitor for Facebook. We have tried many times. Facebook critics like to claim that Facebook is a natural monopoly. They think Facebook is so dominant in the marketplace that they can use it. Suppose market power to keep out competitors. We're told Facebook has so many users, no serious competition will ever be possible. Jeff, we've tried MeWe, we have tried Gab, and nobody goes to those sites. The place is dead. Facebook has entrenched itself in our means of communicating, keeping in touch, logging into other programs. So the answer to the problem when it comes to competition from the point of view of a firm like Facebook is to make things for expensive, difficult for smaller startups and potential competitors. And that's the thing. It quashes competition when you have more government regulation. It knows that if, yeah.
So just to illustrate your point, on my screen, now I'm looking at it right now, I have Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, USA Life, MeWe, Gab. The only one we get any information movement on is Facebook.
Well, we've tried to get people to go over those, and they say now all our friends are there. So good luck, And by the way, we're not Facebook's users or customers. We are their product. We've talked about this before. They track everything we do. We are creating our own dossier. We have created our own dossiers for the federal government. Aspects of our lives that were considered beyond the reach of the federal government without a warrant, we gladly hand them over. Let's go to the second reason. Zuckerberg and Facebook will help write these new rules. In an earlier age, Ryan says, many might have taken his new proclamations as sincere. Fortunately, we live in a cynical age, and even beta reporter at Mashable knows how this game is played. Mashable's Carissa Bell writes, it may seem obvious that Zuckerberg's proposal is self-interested, but it's important to remember that his ideas are designed to help Facebook. And by touting the social network's existing work around political advertising and content moderation, Facebook has an opportunity to determine the rules the rest of the industry will also have to abide by. 3, Facebook will have the benefit of limiting its legal exposure by offloading decisions about harmful content, privacy rules, and elections onto third parties. They may not have to take as much of the heat when mistakes are made. Put another way, they cannot protect themselves from both legal and public relations repercussions to itself when it uses its platform to delete the posts and vibe and visibility of users with whom Facebook disagrees. I mentioned last week that Facebook has contracted out content monitoring to people that are essentially making just above minimum wage. There's a big facility in Arizona, and these people just go through, and you're going to be subject to their personal preferences, and they have the power to shut you down. I mentioned the story of one of my neighbors when I lived in Palo Alto. She worked in human resources, and she was the first hurdle where hopeful job applicants had to get across. Well, she didn't like hunting. So if anybody because at the time, I don't know if people still do it, they'll put something personal about themselves on their resume. Anybody that liked to hunt, she would put the resume in the trash right then and there, regardless of how qualified they might be. So because of her personal disdain for a legal activity that others choose to participate in, she would deny her employer the opportunity to even screen these people to see if they could contribute to that company. So again, this is censorship. You can find this article, Mises.org/wire. We will post that up as well. Google is trying to have also an ethics council for artificial intelligence. This is an article that came out of Bloomberg, and you can read this article as well, but they recently appointed external ethics counsel to deal with tricky issues in artificial intelligence. It's meant to help the company appease critics while still pursuing lucrative cloud computing deals. And you look at this; these people are wanting members kicked off of these panels because they've worked in conservative think tanks. They have purported to support Christian values. Nope, we want them off the panel. This is all hardcore Marxists determining the content and the ability of us to speak freely and share information. Jeff, you want to weigh in? Then we'll hear from Annie, then we'll move on.
Nope. Go to your guest, please.
Go ahead, Annie. You have anything to say about this? Have you experienced any sort of censorship on your Prepper Chicks Blue side or anything else?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just as early as this morning. But and to quickly explain something, I started my Prepper Chicks page and included information about preparedness and politics at the same time. And I call it Prepper Chicks Blue because my icon has a blue background. My main page has a pink background. And I like to keep everything free that I share because I think it's important that people understand you don't have to buy all of these big packages of food or the newest gadget out there. There's so much free information, and that's why I don't take sponsors, is because I don't want the hassle with that. But my pink page is primarily for free skill sets and knowledge building. So I split it because, politics, people like to argue. I didn't want that cluttering my page. So I moved to a separate page specifically for tinfoil stuff, news, anything that nobody else wanted to talk about. And we dig around and try and, it's kind of like spaghetti. You throw it on the wall, see what sticks, to see what's true, because we're getting fed so much misinformation to keep us in this chaotic state of, what is going on and not getting to the truth. But you brought up something important. I think, this isn't necessarily about money. There's only so much money one person can handle at one time. This is about power, and that's what we're looking at here. To have Zuckerman, UN involvement within our soil here in the United States, people should stand up. It's absurd. But if you look at their, us adapting their regulations, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, it's because we're seeing a movement towards bringing all of the countries into a new world order. We've talked about that. It was shunned for forever. It was considered, like I said, tinfoil. But if you look at everything that Suzanne just mentioned when it comes to regulations and whatnot, and then you look at the bigger picture, back away from what's just going on in our soil and look at it from a global standpoint, we're seeing a behavior rating system that has been implemented in China, where if you piss someone off, it's just their opinion. If you piss them off, they won't let you leave the country. You cannot get on a flight and take a vacation somewhere. And I think that, Facebook and all of this is kind of, they're testing it in China because the people there are more docile than we are. So we have these things going on in the background here, such as Facebook, just to test to see how far they can push us. But I mean, it's here, it's coming. And if people don't wake up before they know it, we're in big trouble.
You mentioned that they are docile. I tell you what, I think they're terrified. I really do. And we have seen this. And Google, by the way, is working with the Chinese on censoring search results. They say, we're just doing it in China. No, they're doing it here. Try to find articles I've written for the 10th Amendment Center. You can't find them. Facebook turns to Southern Poverty Law Center to determine what content is hate speech, what is not. But now when you mentioned the globalists, I'm going to touch on this article really, really quickly. And folks, this is important because this is why we combine preparedness and politics. The larger population a government controls, the more draconian their rules have to be. Trump signed a huge wilderness bill, and it continues bipartisan Clinton, Bush, Obama war of the West. I submit to you the two Bushes, Clinton and Obama, were one 28-year-long miserable administration. So here, 375,000 new acres of wilderness across Utah, California, New Mexico, and Oregon have now been gobbled up by the federal government. And this has been now called the National Resources Management Act. When they say bipartisan, I say grab your ankles. This was renamed the John D. Dingell Jr. Conservation Management and Recreation Act. John Dingell, I have mentioned before. You might recognize the name. He was a Democrat from Michigan, your area, my dear. And he said, or you're from Illinois or Indiana. Anyway, Indiana. Okay. So during the debates for the Affordable Care Act, which was neither caring nor affordable, He told reporters, you have to control healthcare so you can control the people. Whoa, he just admitted it. What did his wranglers say? Oh, he misspoke. When a politician, I don't care which party, speaks the truth, they will say he misspoke. So this act is named after the guy who said taking over a sixth of our economy is necessary to control the people. Bipartisan, folks. Let's talk about the globalists. You know who's behind this? We had a big brouhaha when Trump scaled back out here in Utah, Bears Ears National Monument. Mind you, it all stayed within the purview of the federal government, but it didn't have the control level, I guess, of national park or national monument status. So we had a big movement here during a outdoor exhibit expo where people came from all over the country to protest what happened. And one of the ladies I saw at the gym, she was in my lobby, she had a shirt and she was protesting this. And she said, I went up to her and I asked her, so what's going on here? Oh, we're just against this. We want everybody to visit these national parks from around the world. And I said, wow, I was not under the impression, I was unaware that the state parks were denying international visitors. Oh, no, that's not it at all. We just think that these sites belong to the world. It belongs to UNESCO. Whoa. If you're not aware, these people are advocating surrendering our sovereignty to United Nations educational, scientific, cultural organization. I was at Mesa Verde National Park last summer, and one of the tour guides, when we were at one of the cliff dwellings, was talking about how some of these houses hadn't done well and how they hadn't been preserved. And they had managed also to do all this without any other regulation from UNESCO. She says, and imagine how these people could take down these sites, because some of these, again, sites were dismantled. They didn't have UNESCO and the Heritage, whatever that was, Heritage Foundation, telling them what to do. Lucky them. So this is, again, another reason why we prep. And we're going to get into now an article from Organic Prepper. We were talking about preparedness and why. Last week, Annie, we talked about EMPs. And again, as I was thinking before we did this show, EMPs, even if you don't think we're going to have a Carrington event or an EMP, the preparedness is still the same for long term. We can have a societal economic collapse. You need to plan out for the long term, but we can start simple. Why don't you give us an example of why we need to start simply and how to do it?
Well, first of all, because it's so overwhelming. I mean, we get bombarded into preparedness. Well, you need this new gadget over here, and you need a 5-year food supply over here. And it's like you said at the beginning, you need an underground bunker, you need a 50 cal, and it's like, people can't do this. Normal human beings like you and I, we can't do this. We're not these multimillionaire, bunker type people. Personally, I would never go underground, but that's just me. But start small, start in your neighborhood, and stop with the insanity that's going on out there. Learn free skills. Again, in my world, mindset is number one. If you're committed to surviving, you're going to survive. If you have any doubt you're not going to make it, you're probably not. So you have that control over your own mind, and that's something that you need to honestly think about. Second thing is skill sets. It's not, the newest gadget. It's free knowledge, and that's why I share it. You can learn how to find water in various places, because rule of thumb is 3 days without water, you're pretty much done for. And that's a very broad term, because if you've not gone for 2 days without water, your body starts shutting down already. Your mind you start hallucinating. You're not thinking straight. You make some really stupid moves. But And you need to understand that about yourself and how your personal body reacts to not having food and sleep and water and those things. But, learning how to find water in various aspects, whether it's in, your hot water tank after your power goes out, the back of your toilet, things people don't think about, finding it in plant life out there. And then what do you do with it after you find it? How do you catch it yourself so that way you can use it later? All free knowledge. And then how do you make it potable to be able to drink? And again, it's all free information. You don't have to have special gadgets for it or anything like that. Same way with food supply. Rule of thumb, 3 weeks without food, you can survive. You're not going to die. But again, unless you're used to doing a, I can't think of the word, fast of some type, your body reacts differently to not having food every day. And how does that mess with your thought processes? But, start small when it comes to water and food, sit down, take a deep breath, 3 days. Let's start with 3 days. Write out a meal plan for 3 days. What does your family eat for 3 days? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, whatever. And then get a big tote. Gather all the ingredients you need for those 3 days that don't need refrigeration and stick them in the tote, along with things like oil, seasonings, things like that, and even a cooking pan that you would need in order to cook this with. Put the recipes, tape them on the inside of the lid in case something happens to you, then your family knows what's in there, what it's to be used for, because anytime there's a downgrade situation, you're going to have so many other things to do. What you're going to eat, what you're going to eat for the next 3 days, you need to, now it's done, it's solved, it's off your plate. You don't have to deal with it other than fixing it. And that you can hand off to someone else. But like I said, in case something happens to you, your kids know what to do with it.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on
and then build up
about food and water. When I was in California, again, started with a garden. You want to be self-sufficient, but I started buying extra bottles of water and storing those. And I came home one day and there was no water available. The water had been shut off. No problem. When I decided to move out here, and this was really because I saw California crumbling around me, and as I started paying attention to politics on the national level, pardon my French, I realized, I am anticipating something very unpleasant coming down, if not in my lifetime, but during the lifetime of my boys. How can I prepare for that long term in the event it happens? Again, I opted not to go the doomsday prepper route, but I decided to keep it within the realm of reality so I could have a win-win either way. I did some research. I found a piece of property that was going to be far enough out away from society, from any major city, that those that are unprepared and wouldn't know how to survive where I live anyway are not going to make it this far. The other thing I wanted to consider was, am I close enough so we can still have an enjoyable life, go to town, see movies, go to museums if we wanted to? So that's why I opted. I'm about an hour from Salt Lake City, and then, Park City's probably midway in between there. So logistics and the ability to still have a normal life. Some people want to be way out in the middle of Alaska. I had 2 boys that were still growing up, still needed access to their dad. And this was the happy medium that we found. With regards to water, the place here has a creek running behind it. So I can access water even in the summer months when it's very low. That means you must be able to purify your water. So Annie, you had mentioned find it from sources, your water heater, your toilet bowl tank, or your toilet tank, and other sources, means by which you can gather it in the wild. That's why I like the wilderness survival, the bushcrafting skills. This is all interrelated. It all ties together. Even if you
absolutely.
think, yeah, primitive survival, I think, is very underrated, because anybody going on even just a short little hike can find themselves in trouble. That happened to me in Tennessee. We were in the Smoky Mountain National Park. I thought it'd be fun to follow the trail back by walking in the creek, and then presto, it would take us right to the parking lot where we started. Well, what I forgot was there was a significant portion of this trail where this creek was a couple hundred yards down in a gorge. By the time we got out of there, we had been walking through this creek, stumbling, falling down for over 3 hours. The sun went behind the trees. Now we could no longer see where we were putting our feet. Trails are there for a reason. I kind of digress a little bit, but bushcrafting skills would have made this a lot more tolerable, and I would have been a lot smarter than to do that in the first place. Let's talk about food a little bit. Go ahead.
I was going to real quick. There was a story a couple weeks ago out of California, I believe. 2 little girls, I think they were 5 and 8 years old, got lost for over 72 hours in the woods. By all respects, should have been dead. But because their parents taught them basic, I'm not talking into bushcraft or anything. I'm talking basic survival skills. These 2 little girls were able to walk out of there alive. How awesome is that?
That was a great story. And that's why I also encourage bring your kids into this fold here. Have them. My kids were little when I started my garden in California. What were they doing there? Playing in the mud. They helped me pick it. They understand how important it is. Once we moved out here, we started hunting for food. Again, now food preservation is really important. And if you go to my webpage, SuzanneCSherman.com, I have a couple of blogs, one of which warns you against the long-term options. And we've talked about this before, and I know you've covered this on your site too. It's very tempting if you have the financial means to just spend $5,000 or $6,000 on what's considered a 4-year supply of freeze-dried goods. Go to my article and read my warnings against that. I have opted to have a combination of not only those foods, but also buy the cans of dehydrated foods and also pressure canning. As you and I had discussed before, it's nice to have a meal that you can just open and it's ready to go. If you know how to pressure can or hot water can your foods, that's ready to go. What I like about pressure canning is I have soups, stews, chili, venison, elk already cooked. You can open those and not have to reheat them. Yes, the government says you should boil them again for 10 minutes before you eat them, but this is the very same government that's required. That's why I'm prepping to avoid. So think about your food as well. And let's see, what else do you want to contribute? Let's talk a little bit more about food. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you're spot on. I have 2 of those All-Americans. They are my life in the fall or any leftovers you have. I grew up on a farm, so I have a tendency to make large meals, and it's just my son and I right now. So it's like you have leftovers, put them in a small jar, save them for a couple days and then throw them in the canner and use them in the wintertime. And that being said, it is working into, we're trying to get into spring right now. And I know a lot of people have used a lot of their resources over the winter. If you have empty jars in your house, shame on you. They should be filled with water, and they should be water baths so you have sterile drinking water at any time. But you brought up, the steps of food preparedness, and you brought up gardening, which I think is great. I wish people would understand it's all about replication. How are you going to replace the items that you're using on a regular basis, such as onions? Yes, we can dehydrate them, but eventually all those expensive food stores that you have are going to run out. So you need to learn how to garden. You need to learn how to store seeds yourself, because you're not going to be able to mail order them, in the springtime. But also, I advocate a technique in gardening that is called permaculture. It's a permanent culture of gardening around your home, where you actually turn your property into your own little Eden. You have to learn what perennial plants are out there and how to implement those around your house. And you can even do this if you live in an HOA, in a city, anywhere. But learn what for instance, you love potatoes. Well, they're only going to last long unless you know how to save them every year. But what other resources are out there? There's a perennial plant called a Jerusalem artichoke or a sunchoke. Grows up, looks like a sunflower, gorgeous plant, but you eat the tubers just the same way as you would a potato. And they're actually better for you than a spud is.
Are those
so
purple?
You need to... Some of them can be,
Yeah.
but the ones I have are yellow. Just they look like a very small sunflower, but they grow probably 10, 12 feet tall, and they spread like crazy.
Dandelions too. My lawn pretty soon will
Oh,
be covered at them. That people kill them. We have so many uses
yes.
for dandelions. Salves are high in vitamin C. The tubers, like you mentioned before. You mentioned the culture growing a garden in your front yard. How many communities have banned that in the interest of local conformity in the community? Government has a they think it
Absolutely.
is better to have a certain appearance than it is for the people to be able to feed themselves. Why? Because they don't want you to be able to feed themselves. That is the implication here. You know, they don't want people that can come together in a community in times of crisis and say, no, thank you, FEMA. You can go bother somebody else. This is really important stuff. We're down to 4 minutes. This is just a starting point. Annie Berdel will be joining us more. I just love having you here. Let's take a few minutes to talk about your books. They're available on Amazon. People can follow you on Amazon. I love the post-apoc genre. I loved your book, Alpha Farm. And these are great ways, if you don't understand why you need to prepare, entertain yourself and enlighten yourself at the same time. Let's spend a couple minutes talking about your book, and then I'm going to have to wrap up the show.
Okay, real fast. I started writing the post-apocalyptic because years ago when I started Prepper Chicks, I was interviewing on my radio show a lot of authors that because I think they're important tools in the preparedness world, because they do put a lot of information in them, and people don't read technical manuals. They need a storyline, but I started reading all of these post-apocalyptic books and realized these are all written by guys. They have very weak female characters in them, and it's like, oh, I can't take this. I got to change this. So I started writing my own. It's called, my first series is called Alpha Farm. It's about a bunch of women spread out kind of like an underground railroad around the country. We have an event that happens, and how, these women in these alpha farms end up, do they end up saving the country? We will wait and find out. But Alpha Farm has 2 books out right now. It has 2 more coming out this year. And then I have a new series that goes to the editor in a week and a half called Old School. And it's about a bunch of cranky old people in a nursing home that have to break out after a downgrade and go rescue their grandkids and teach them the old school way of doing things. And I think putting, technical skill sets into a storyline, people remember that stuff better. What would Emma do in this situation? Or what did Emma do in this situation versus reading, like I said, the technical manuals.
We got to wrap up the show, but this is so great because these stories will tell people, they'll give them ideas that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. Wow, I never thought, how am I going to heat all of these dried beans I'd stored? I took a big bag of dried beans, pressure canned them. So now I can open them up. Imagine the scarce resources that you would have to cook foods like that. You're not going to be able to. Make this fun. Invite your family. Unfortunately, you missed our party we had after PrepperCon last year. And we had Eric Betcher, survivalist. We had Shannon Culpa from Naked and Afraid. We were out here doing friction fires, and the kids were involved. Everybody had a great time. Get some chickens. Kids love chickens. Get them involved in this homesteading mentality. Get them into that mindset. As you said, the mind is absolutely of critical importance. I think I'm going to do a show about how my mindset one time without any skills literally saved my life. That's all we have time for today. Jeff Johnson, Annie Berdel, Prepper Chicks, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Suzanne Sherman. This is the Cerberus Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.